the members of the community that encouraged us to host this program. Dr. Friedman's education is started at Dartmouth College in '61, where he got his degree, followed by a PhD at Albert Einstein College of Medicine and Pharmacology. He continued in '69, graduated from the University of Kentucky College of Medicine with his MD. Thankfully, he lives here in Woodstock, and we are so pleased that he's local, and he's obviously the senior advisor of the VA's National Medical Center on PTSD and a world authority on the topic, and we're really delighted to have you here. So let me start here and tell me when you'd like, and I will condition you.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks. Well, thanks everybody for coming. What I want to say two things before I get into my slides. One is that I came here to have a conversation and not to wave my arms and point to my slides. So please interrupt me at any time. I mean, if you have a question, a thought, chances are 2 or 3 other people have the same thought, and I would much rather, I mean, I know what the slides are, and they're not very many because I wanted to leave plenty of room so that we could engage with each other. So that's point number one. Point number two, and this is a question that's going to come up, so I want to really anticipate it, is that this slide set is about veterans. And for obvious reasons, I've been working for the Department of Veterans Affairs for over 40 years. The National Center for PTSD is under the aegis of the VA, and the National Center is, and many of the video clips are from our website, and they're of veterans. In fact, if you want to get onto our website, I think I have a slide showing it, but anything you really want to know about PTSD, you can get on our website. I'll say it now and I'll say it later. It's easy to remember. It's ptsd.va.gov, G-O-V. One of the really smart things that we did, and I can't take credit for it, someone else much smarter than me thought of this. We hired a filmmaker named Vicki Biphart. Vicki lives in Norwich. Some of you may know of her work. And we have this feature that you'll find on our website, which is called About Face. And she's now filmed over 60 vets, maybe 15 family members, a few therapists, et cetera. And they answer 7 different questions. When did I know I had PTSD? How did it affect my family? When did I decide to get treatment? How did treatment affect me? And on and on and on and on. And the vet is talking to you. He or she is looking at you and having a conversation with you. And they come in all ages, all wars, all genders, all colors, and so people can identify. You can kind of dial a vet, and he or she will answer these questions for you. So I have about 8 of those clips, and they're very short. They're between 1 and 2 minutes to illustrate some of the different symptoms of PTSD. So you can actually have someone who's been there tell you what it's been like for him or her. The point I want to make is that although the talk itself is, you might say, veteran-centric or military-centric, PTSD is not just something that happens to military personnel. You know, when I started, and I've been around a long time now, if you wanted to find out what we then called PTSD, which was traumatic neurosis or war neurosis or whatever, you'd have to go to a tiny little section with footnotes under military psychiatry. Well, we've learned a lot since the 60s and 70s. We've learned since the World Trade Center was attacked. We've learned since the tsunami. We've learned since people at Charlie Hebdo get slaughtered by assassins, motor vehicle accidents, that PTSD is not just something that happens to military people. In fact, most Americans with PTSD are not military personnel. They're men, women, and children who've been in the wrong place at the wrong time, whether it's domestic violence, urban violence, traffic accidents, bad luck, natural disasters, and on and on. So, as I'm waving my arms and showing you my slides, before you've decided to interrupt me, and I really am looking forward to the interruptions, kind of take the information and apply it to civilian situations. I mean, the chances are that at least half of you have been exposed to at least one traumatic event. We know from the epidemiology in peacetime United States before 9/11 that over half of all adult men and women have been exposed to at least one traumatic event. I've been exposed to a couple, and I'm not a veteran. So my guess is that many of you have, and what the slides will say is that most of us are resilient. Most of us exposed to these events don't get PTSD, and it's important to know the difference. Okay, so let's get started. Let's see. Oh, we're ready, huh? So,
are you going to talk about why some people do get PTSD and others don't?
I don't. I would love to do that. I don't know if I have a slide, so I will. I will, because I think that, frankly, now that I've been at this for so long, to me, that's the most important question. I mean, really, the word for it is resilience. What is it, given what I just said, and I have two slides, I've just sort of given away two of my slides. If you just look in the United States, over half of all adult men and women have been exposed to one of these events, and yet the prevalence of PTSD is about 8%. 10% female, 5% male. So that means that 80% of people, and why not? And why is that? And if I don't cover it, please, I will. Yes.
I also want to say that from statistics that I've read, that women who have been sexually abused, raped, and so on, domestic abuse, college, and all the rest, there's many more of them than there are soldiers that have PTSD, and I would suggest that maybe they don't get much support. And maybe that's one of the reasons why they have this. That support would be one reason why you'd be resilient.
We'll talk about that, and obviously, if we don't talk enough about it, you're going to interrupt me and raise your hand, and we'll talk some more. This is great. I guess I don't need to encourage you to interrupt me. It's good.
Please start.
Oh, I have to press something?
No.
You have to press something. No. Go back. No.
You have to go back.
I have to go back.
One more. Okay, now wait.
Don't give him post.
And don't touch anything.
All right.
My name is Corporal Bradley Joseph Seitz.
Captain Joshua Brandon.
Bob Murphy.
Kate Weber.
Jerry Reed.
Will Sanchez.
And I have PTSD.
I have PTSD.
I have PTSD.
I thought I was losing my mind.
Everything just fell apart.
I was still in a war zone in my mind.
I felt isolated. I felt alone.
And I made a choice. I made a choice to go seek treatment.
Treatment has definitely helped me. Treatment has turned my life completely around.
It was like the new beginning for me.
If you're tired of dealing and living the way you are right now, then do something about it.
Quit beating yourself up and go ahead and help. That's basically all I can tell you. But you need help, so go get it.
So that's a taste of About Face, and you'll see more of that. So that's a title page. We don't need that. So this is sort of what I'm going to do. It's my general outline, and there's questions you've already asked me that aren't on that outline, so we'll have plenty to talk about even before I get started. So I think that the first issue in PTSD is defining traumatic stress. I mean everybody is exposed to stress. That's part of life. I mean, unless you're living in a cocoon with all the food dropped in and everything else. I mean, stress is part of life. And the daily hassles, the car breaking down, paying the bills, raising kids, I mean, you know it all. And major life events. And some of these are very, very devastating, losing a job, divorce. But serious traumatic events. And one of the challenges in PTSD, and frankly, in much of psychiatry, is drawing, where do you draw the line between what's a normal kind of distress, and at what point does it become pathological, right? At what point does grieving over the death of someone that you love become abnormal grieving that requires clinical attention? And similarly, at what point do the normal reactions to a terribly distressing event, whether it's being in a war zone, being sexually violated, being in a terrorist attack, at what point do the normal reactions? Because in many ways, PTSD is nothing more than the normal reaction to these horrific events that not only gets magnified, but that there's no off switch. So you have people who may have been traumatized decades ago, Holocaust survivors. You probably saw on the TV in Germany there was a trial, they just announced a verdict of a guard at Auschwitz. I mean, and the witnesses were people in their 80s and 90s, Auschwitz survivors. They're still having, many of them don't have PTSD, many of them do. To be in that kind of a situation and to have nightmares and to have other kind, that's not necessarily abnormal. So we have to be very, very careful in drawing those lines, and that's one of the challenges. So it's somewhat arbitrary. War zone exposure, sexual assault, terrorist attacks, torture, etc. If we think about this in a perhaps a stress and coping or a psychobiological, and this begins to get to your question. The way I think about it is when the coping capacity is overwhelmed. We humans are built for to take all kinds of psychological and physical blows. I mean, I fell off a bike yesterday. I got a couple scratches, but I didn't break a leg. I didn't do this. I mean, and I think that, but had I been hit by a big truck, I wouldn't have gotten back up and walked away. And I think that one way of thinking about what is a traumatic stressor is the psychological equivalent of being hit by an 18-wheeler truck. We're not built for that much, although some people miraculously do cope. Many don't. So I already talked about this. So this is from a study called the National Comorbidity Study, where they basically surveyed Americans. It's an epidemiological study. So these are not people seeking treatment. These are and again, about 60% of men, about 50% of adult women have been exposed to at least one traumatic event in the course of their lives. But as I said before, most of those little blue critters don't have PTSD. It's only about 8%. The gender ratio is about twice female to male, so that women are twice as likely to have depression, anxiety disorders, PTSD. Men are more likely to have alcoholism, substance abuse. Male children more likely to have conduct disorders. And these are the trajectories. So most of us, when we're exposed to a 9/11 or a sexual assault, most of us, initially are very, very upset. They're very, very upset. But within a month's time, most of us will recover. That's not to say that we don't carry the event with us. We may not, that we still don't have dreams about it, but we're not clinically incapacitated. It's not clinically significant, and then they're kind of a normal recovery. Other people, may have a real difficult time, maybe even for a few months, and then recover, sometimes spontaneously, sometimes with treatment. I mean, this is where people like me get involved, to try to accelerate this trajectory. And even in disaster psychiatry or disaster psychology or military, we try to accelerate the recovery even of normal recovery. And then some people never recover. I mean, for some people, PTSD can go on for decades. I think people first had an inkling of this. There was a World War II study done in the 60s or 70s, and they found that the people who had what they were calling shell shock or combat fatigue not only were they not better, but many of them were actually worse. So with PTSD, time is not necessarily a healer. Unattended PTSD isn't necessarily going to remit on its own, which is why the bottom line here is if you've got it, get treatment. Yes, Nan?
I'm going to take you at your word by interruption.
No, it's okay. I meant it.
I'm just wondering when this man, this gentleman, asked about resilience.
Yes.
If we look at that, are we much more apt now to make judgments of the people who don't have resilience? That's my only concern. If we look at someone and say, "Oh well, they get over it," then we look at the ones that don't get over it as somehow being flawed.
So let me divide your question in half and go back to Doe's question also. I think that I think in some cultures, I think in military cultures, in macho cultures where it's shameful to acknowledge any vulnerabilities. That can be it's particularly a problem because the most powerful protective factor is social support. And probably it's a good time for me to address your question too. I think that if we think about resilience, so what's the difference? What's the difference between these people and these people? Well, the short answer is we're just even beginning to ask the right questions. But and there's a couple of good books out on it, which I can recommend later on if anyone's interested. But it's a complicated equation. It's everything from genes, choosing the right parents, right, to social support. And in between that, there are psychological processes, there are coping styles, there are behavioral strategies, there are personality variables, there's luck. People who've been one of the best long-term studies on civilians has been a follow-up of the 9/11 World Trade. And one of the things that they found was that one of the predictors of non-recovery was other adverse events following 9/11, and it didn't necessarily have to be traumatic. It could be a divorce, could be bankruptcy, could be flunking out, could be getting rejected by someone that you love. So I think the good thing about that for me as a clinician, because what I want to do, I want to understand resilience better so that I can devise new ways of helping people. So what it means is if I have an individual who doesn't have the right genetic makeup, I know that if I can increase his or her social support, I can maybe offset. In fact, there was an experiment that was done by our group a number of years ago, Joan Kaufman, who's down at Yale. And what Joan did was she looked at children who'd been placed in foster homes by the state of Connecticut. And these children had, really terrible histories of maltreatment. There's one particular gene which is involved in serotonin transmission, which has two different variants if you look at it under the electron microscope. One is the long form and one is a short form. And we knew from previous work that people, and as you know, you have two of each gene, so that a genotype could be a long, a short, or a short-long. So, and the original studies were done in New Zealand, actually, with a bunch of now young adults in their 30s who've been followed since early childhood, and they genotyped them, and they found that the men and women who had the long genotype, despite all kinds of adverse events, were okay. Those with the short phenotype, particularly if they'd had 3 or more adverse events, some of which were traumatic, but some of which were things like bankruptcy or failure, were more likely to be depressed, suicidal, hospitalized. So we know there's a genetic component. So what Joan did was she genotyped these kids. So she knew, and just looking at this one gene, and she took the highest risk group, which would be the short group, and she found that those short kids who had maintained contact with their biological parents, even though they were in foster homes, so had been able to maintain that social support, that the social support offset the genetic vulnerability. So it's not one gene and you got blue eyes or brown eyes. It's a complicated equation, and to me, a clinician, and a wannabe public health psychiatrist, it means that there are many different doors through which intervention is possible. So thanks for the question. Anything else about that? No. Okay, so let's move on.
Are you going to speak at any point about treatment modes?
Yes, I am. So this is PTSD. So PTSD. So this is how we define a traumatic event. Okay, and there are 4 different ways that you can. So you can't have PTSD unless you've been exposed to a traumatic event. Okay, it's one of maybe half a dozen psychiatric diagnoses where that is a stipulation. So you can get depressed without having an event precede the depression. You can have an anxiety disorder without having but for PTSD and for a few other problems, you must, and that's in the diagnostic criteria. And this is how the criterion is expressed. And I'll unpack it for you. But you had a question.
Can that happen with, say, neurosurgery?
Can what
surgery?
Happen?
I mean, does David Roberts, who's a really good neurosurgeon, does he have trouble with that afterward? In other words...
Trouble with what? Does he himself or the patient?
No. Does a patient, does someone who's had surgery?
I mean, actually, it's a really interesting... There are a number of cases where people were inadequately anesthetized and woke up during their surgery. And you better believe that that's a traumatic event. You better believe it. All right? A number of groans of somewhat recognition, just going to the dentist, right? Not having enough anesthesia can be pretty awful. So there are 4 different ways. So this is what we call the A criterion. This is A1 through 4. So the first way is that you were there. You were exposed to that traumatic event. Someone tried to kill you, someone tried to rape you, you were in a fatal traffic accident where the driver was killed, you survived. Secondly is witnessing but not being in specific danger yourself. Okay? It's why this is an occupational hazard for, say, journalists, for example. Who are military. Absolutely. You can think of a lot of stuff. The third one is, in some ways, the most complicated one, and that is indirect exposure. And that's where you yourself were never in any danger, but someone that you love died violently or accidentally, or you had a loved one who was subjected to rape or other sexual violence. Is the indirect exposure. Perhaps a famous example are the mothers of the disappeared during the dirty war in Argentina, where you knew that if your son or daughter was taken away and didn't come back in a day or two, that they were probably being tortured and eventually killed. The fourth one is kind of an interesting one, and this is more for professionals, people who are never in danger themselves, but they're exposed day in and day out to the grisly consequences of trauma. In the military, people that go out and collect the body parts to be put in a bag and sent home. Photojournalists who going afterwards.
ER physician.
Absolutely. EMTs. People like me that work with mental health people that have been traumatized, who are not in danger themselves. And drone operators. Drone operators really know the drone. You know, the drones that we're using in the Middle East. So that's an indirect exposure. So that's the official definition of what a traumatic event is. And then there are 4 different symptom clusters, and I'm going to go through each of them, and I have veterans on video clips to help me describe these to you. There are the re-experiencing symptoms where the traumatic event has a life of its own. It may have happened 40 years ago, but you're still having nightmares about it, or you can't stop thinking about it. Because these memories are so terrible, you'll do almost anything to avoid them, avoidance symptoms. And then there's a third category we call negative cognitions and mood. negative feelings, thoughts that are clearly trauma related, and finally the hyperarousal symptoms. And in order to have, the minimum way that you can have PTSD is you have to have 6 symptoms. You have to have one re-experiencing, one avoidance, and then 2 of these clusters. And we'll unpack those, and the veterans will do better. So the first cluster are the intrusion or the re-experiencing symptoms. There are 5 of these. The first is that you can't stop thinking about, well, you come to the library, you want to hear this guy in a blue shirt talk about, and you can't stop thinking about a terrible event that happened last night or happened 5 years ago. I mean, and we call it intrusive. It kind of just pushes aside all the other thoughts you want to have and insists that you would take listen to it. The second are the traumatic nightmares, which have been described since Shakespeare described Henry IV's traumatic nightmares. And third are the flashbacks. It's sort of like, think of all the movies that you've seen where the present dissolves and the individual is back in. Well, it's like being in a time machine. I mean, you actually have lost your reality testing. You're back wherever it was, fighting for your life or fending off your assailant. And the fourth and the fifth are very important, and they really adhere to classic Pavlovian learning theory, and that is that stimuli, reminders of the traumatic event, can trigger strong emotional reactions and physical. Your heart's going to start to race. You're going to sweat. You're going to tense up, etc. Those last 2 symptoms, we use those in the laboratory to really evoke PTSD symptoms, whether we're putting someone in a brain scanner or wiring them up for a physiological array, exposing them to reminders of the event, and then we can see. Because PTSD is really, unlike depression, which is a change in your basal state, PTSD is really a disorder of reactivity. It's how you react to these reminders and to these situations. And so those are the re-experiencing symptoms. So now I'm going to have some help telling you about what these symptoms are like. So I think if I just press this, right? No?
Sure.
What did I do wrong?
Let me do it. I think you just go like this.
Anytime a helicopter went over, that affected me very much because I saw some guys die in a helicopter, well, actually 2 helicopter crashes in Vietnam.
The biggest trigger for me is smell.
I do have a lot of nightmares. They have to do with what happened out there, most of them.
So I was in Arabic class, and I remember the teacher. Like, I remember him lecturing us, and I looked out the window, and all of a sudden I started seeing things that weren't there. I really thought my rapist was there. I really thought he was going to come in the window and get me.
So that last one is a flashback. And very often the flashback will be triggered by being in a situation that is reminiscent of how let me give an example that I've used previously. A woman working in a large city is going home from work at dusk, and the sun is setting behind the buildings and there are long shadows, and an assailant comes out from the shadows in an alley, pulls her in and rapes her. She develops PTSD. Sometime later, at the end of the workday, she's walking home, it's dusk, there's shadows, she sees an assailant there, just like the woman here, right? Other people have mentioned nightmares. Someone else talks about helicopters being a reminder. Certainly in modern warfare, that's a dramatic stimulus that triggers a lot of that. So those are examples of the first cluster, the re-experiencing the intrusion symptoms. And you just need one of those, 1 out of 5 to meet the, yes, Joby?
Matt, when the trauma is, say, ongoing,
yes,
like with a child who's sexually abused over time,
right?
Isn't that not more difficult to deal with in terms of treatment, or is it not?
That's a really important question, which hasn't been completely settled. Just to kind of to dumb it down a little bit, it sort of is one moment of sheer terror the same as countless, and I can tell you, we did a study on women with PTSD as a result of child sexual abuse. Some of these women had been violated scores, if not hundreds of times, between the ages of 7 and 12, something like that, because you're a captive, and we don't really know. I mean, I think because of there's a lot of moving parts here. I think because of resilience, for some people that could be devastating and possibly, even make them resistant to treatment. For other people, but we know from the data, and I know from my own work, that people with that kind of a background can respond very well to some of the treatments. But on balance, I would agree with you that a person who has been exposed to repetitive trauma for over a long period of time, is probably going to be a bigger challenge to treat. But that doesn't mean they're untreatable.
Is treatment always on an individual basis?
No, it's not. However, and we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves, but that's okay. The best treatments we have right now are psychotherapy treatments, not medications. And the best treatments right now that have been empirically verified are individual treatments. However, there are group treatment. When we did our first treatment study, when Paula Schnurr and I, we did a group therapy because we thought that peer support would accelerate the recovery process. The problem with a group treatment is that you're sharing. You have to share. So there's offsets. That if you have the support, you don't have the dosage of therapy that's directed at you, because you've got to share it with 6 or 8 other people that are in the room. The theory, of course, is that each group member is him or herself also, when they're not dealing with their own stuff, assisting in the treatment. But at the moment, the individual treatments seem to be better. There is one group treatment that is looking pretty good, but the data are not convincing. And there's one couples treatment that's looking pretty good, but none of them have the strength of evidence of the 2 individual psychotherapies at the moment.
The combination is probably pretty good.
Some people get individual, group, and medications. Yeah. Okay. So now we're moving to the avoidance, and there are really 2 avoidance symptoms. One is avoiding the thoughts. So you just can't stop thinking about what happened, and people will try to distract themselves with music, with activities, with other kinds, and sometimes with destructive behavior, sometimes with alcohol. And then the other one is behavioral avoidance. Basically, if you've been in a motor vehicle accident, not being able to bring yourself to drive your car past that intersection where maybe your best friend was killed or paralyzed or what have you. A typical event for veterans in particular is they won't watch the nightly news. They don't want to see what's happened in the news. One of the things I always ask veterans, particularly veterans who've grown up in this part of the world, I'll say, well, when you were growing up, did you go out hunting with your father? And usually they'll say yes, and I'll say, well, how about now? Do you? And they'll say, no, I don't want to be in the woods with a firearm, knowing that other people with a firearm are there. So that would be behavioral avoidance. Some people will give up careers, or a person who was assaulted in an elevator and works on the 35th floor, will have to change her job. So that's behavioral avoidance. So let's see if I can do this. No, I can't do it. I can't do it. Anyone who knows me knows that I can't do it.
It's our generation.
Sometimes I really can't leave my house.
When I first came back, I couldn't even walk in Walmart. I had a real hard problem going to Walmart. I'd hear people talk from a different language, and it put me on edge. I would literally back up against the aisle in the wall and watch the aisle down until they passed, if they were behind me.
I used to disappear on weekends and just drive. Come home on Monday morning and go to work. They understand why I would do things like I would drive to New York City to get a cup of coffee at night and drive home. Driving became my release. They couldn't understand that at the time. They do now. They realize that I just had to do that.
When you do what I've been doing for so many years, you think about things a little different. So we did one of the first experiments to show that people with PTSD were psychophysiologically different, and we were showing different scenes of combat scenes and measuring their blood pressure and everything. And we said, well, we need a comparison. So the first time we chose pictures of a mall, and to our surprise, these are all veterans. The veterans' blood pressures were going up at their pulse rate, and a mall is unsafe. There's nowhere to hide. So when you think about PTSD, you have to kind of walk in these individuals' shoes. So we substituted that with a beautiful brook or some birds singing. But it never occurred to those of us that don't have PTSD that something as bland as a mall would be threatening. And typically people with PTSD, they'll do their shopping at 2 a.m. when no one's there.
You know, I was at the mall yesterday in the Mall of New Hampshire, in Manchester.
Yes.
It's not bland. It's
No, it
not
isn't.
bland. I don't have PTSD, but it was very stressful to be in that mall.
But it wasn't frightening. It was just irritating. There's a difference. Yeah, I know. I agree. It's just.
That's true.
So you need one voice. So one re-experiencing, one avoidance, and then the third cluster are what we call negative alterations in cognition. And there are 6 of these symptoms, and you need 2 of these. So one of them, which has been known for a long time, is amnesia. People just can't remember the worst things that happened. Someone that escaped from Kosovo will remember that the paramilitary Serbs came to the house, and then can't remember what happened was his father and brother were shot, and his mother was raped. What's interesting is that when these people are in treatment, these inaccessible memories become more and more accessible. A second symptom in this cluster is self-blame, that it's your fault. And what the therapy is to help people realize it couldn't possibly be their fault, but it's a very, very powerful emotion.
Is that like survivor guilt?
That's different. This is self-blame. This is basically irrational acceptance of responsibility for what happened. Survivor guilt is really the guilt that you survived when others didn't. And that really is another one of these symptoms: guilt, shame, despair, anger. That's another symptom in this cluster. Another symptom are basically negative beliefs about yourself and the world, that I'm incompetent, or I'm a sinner, or the world is evil. Other kinds of symptoms in this cluster are a social withdrawal. Rural areas like the Northeast, the Northwest, the Desert Southwest, the Florida Everglades, a lot of the veterans with PTSD will actually flee to those areas to avoid encountering other people.
Loss of language, ability to find the words. Is that
Now, that wouldn't be a PTSD problem. That would be more of a neurological problem most of the time. And then probably in many ways, the worst symptom in this cluster is what we used to call numbing, but we now call constricted affect. It's the inability to feel positive emotions. Inability to feel love, intimacy, joy. For those who may recall, in the Brothers Karamazov, one of the main characters is a Russian Orthodox friar called Father Zosima. Someone asks him, he says, well, what is hell? And his answer is, hell is the inability to love. And that's what people with PTSD are experiencing. It's one of the reasons why divorce and family disruption are so much higher among people with this. So Jen, I'm going to need another, let me see, what did you do that I can't seem to figure out what to do?
Just push in here and hit that.
Oh, that one?
This one.
Oh.
Sometimes it takes twice.
All right.
And then a few prayers. And
a few prayers.
it should just take it with that.
Yeah, the emotional numbness, I think, is the most... It'll just tear away all the relationships in your life.
I don't want to have to try and explain it to people, and I didn't want to have to go over my experiences every single time to try and let somebody know. So it's much easier just not to have friends.
Everything I did was wrong. The war in Vietnam was my fault. Anyone who died there, I might as well have pulled the trigger. It was my fault. So therefore, I probably wasn't worth helping.
I trusted no one, absolutely zero trust, even in my own family, my own sons, my immediate family, and friends that I had, lost total trust in my friends, because I felt like if I trusted somebody and somewhat opened up, I was going to get hurt.
So you think about PTSD and suicide, I think you can, particularly in this symptom cluster, there's feelings of worthlessness, self-blame, guilt. That's a pretty potent stew for feeling that life isn't worth living.
The young man with the piercings, with the pierced ears.
Yes.
Did you find any significance in those piercings related to the PTSD or to feelings of guilt?
No, I think that's just.
Did he have the piercings before he suffered PTSD?
I don't know. I didn't shoot. I don't know that particular individual, but there's lots of young men and women with body piercing, and it's not necessarily diagnostic, But so I say, yeah.
I assume that there are different reasons.
Yeah, yeah. It may just be as simple as wanting to be like everyone else in your particular group, where there's a lot of. Then the final cluster is what we call arousal and hyperreactivity, and this is because people are so aroused that they can't sleep, they can't concentrate, they're aggressive and have irritable outbursts. They're very jumpy, and what we call hypervigilance. They're constantly what the soldiers call having your head on a swivel, so that no one's going to ambush you and rape you or kill you or do something like that. Locks on the doors, Rottweilers to protect you. It's in many ways PTSD is about the inability to feel safe. Everything is dangerous, and you're not going to let things happen to you that are going to jeopardize that. So she's not here, so I'm on my own, huh? No?
Before going to Iraq, I really didn't understand what road rage was. I couldn't understand why people would get so angry, and I found myself really furious at people who would do things, not even necessarily cutting me off and being dangerous, but just stupid things.
Back in the days when I was going through what I call my Chernobyl period. I slept 1 or 2 hours every other day, and I never slept without a loaded gun and a survival knife near me.
A lady was coming towards me in a hurry, and she dove right into her purse. And the first thing I did instantly was, I need to protect my nieces. I started scooting them behind the pillar, started moving away, and I instantly went reaching for my hip and realized, wait, I don't have a knife or a gun. And this happened in like 3 seconds, and all she did was, in my head, all I was thinking was gun, 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 gun. She's gonna pull a gun on me. And all she did was get her cell phone.
So people with PTSD are constantly looking for dangerous situations because they don't want to be caught. So the bias, if there's an ambiguous situation, is they're going to interpret it as dangerous. And this guy has the kind of self-knowledge to realize that because of that, he almost attacked this woman because he was misperceiving a basically banal situation where she's reaching in her purse for a cell phone. He almost attacked her. So that a person with PTSD is, and on a battle zone, this is adaptive, is to assume danger unless proven otherwise. Because a false positive, a faulty assumption of danger is much better than a failure to perceive, than a false negative. A false negative can kill you. A false positive might be embarrassing, right? And so that's how the information is processed.
False positive can kill someone else.
False positive can kill someone else. That's right. These dogs we call fear biters, right? I mean, they're not vicious dogs. They're just, but you back them in a corner, they're going to bite you. It's not out of aggression. It's out of trying to self-protection. I've already done this part, so we can move on. This is data from returning soldiers from Iraq and Afghanistan, and what we're measuring here, this is percentage. And this is, so I think this is PTSD, this is anxiety, this is depression, this is total. In other words, about a quarter of all of our returning veterans had some mental problem. Now that's in the near term. What we don't know is what's this going to look like 10 years from now. You know, we can look back on our data with Vietnam veterans. What we knew for the Vietnam veterans was that 30% of them had some PTSD within the first 10, 15 years of their return, but half of them had recovered. Now, that's maybe not the right word. No longer had PTSD. Not to have PTSD doesn't mean you aren't still having some residual symptoms, but they no longer had PTSD. So, and this gets back to the question of number one, vulnerability, and number two, resilience. And this is basically the pre-traumatic factors. Who was this individual, you know, at the time that he or she encountered this overwhelming event? What happened during the event itself? And what was the post-event situation like, and how do these predict PTSD? Now, as I said earlier, in perhaps the good news is that the post-traumatic factors are most important, and by that I mean social support, family support, getting into treatment. Personal factors include everything from your DNA to your your character, your psychological profile, also whether you came from a broken home, whether you had an alcoholic family in the family, whether you had a parent with PTSD, what happened to you. And the traumatic event, there's sort of a dose-response curve. The more intense the trauma, the more likely you're going to get PTSD.
I've heard so many stories of Holocaust survivors who refuse to talk about it with their children or anyone else. So they were avoiding it. Does that mean that they have PTSD?
Not necessarily. I mean, but it's consistent. I mean, many people, whether the Holocaust survivors, rape victims, veterans, don't want to talk about it. That's the avoidance symptom, you know, because to talk about it is to re-experience the event itself. A number of years ago, Gail, my wife, who's over there, and I were invited to talk to a Dartmouth English class. They were studying the literature of the Vietnam War. And what was really interesting in that class, there were children of veterans, and there were also Southeast Asian children of Vietnamese who had been relocated. And all of those kids had the assignment to write about PTSD. And what happened was that for the first time, the parent would talk about it so that his or her child could get a good grade in the English class. Otherwise, they would have kept silent. So silence is not diagnostic, but it's certainly consistent with the diagnosis.
It doesn't mean that you won't have mental health. I mean, I think the World War II men that I know almost never talked about it. You couldn't get them to talk about the war.
So there's two pieces to that. So one piece is the part I just talked about, the not wanting to remind yourself. There also was a kind of a cohort effect. I mean, men of that generation, you know, and one of them was my father, didn't talk about feelings.
No.
You know, whereas the men who went to Vietnam were much more open about their feelings. Not as open as the women, but they were certainly more open than their fathers had been. So again, there's a multi-determination. There's not one particular, you know, what might explain it for one individual might not explain it for someone else.
But Matt, excuse me, isn't it true that childhood trauma, so they don't have, a lot of them don't have access to those memories. Somehow those memories get split off.
Well, okay, so that's another point that I actually didn't make, and that is that there is a psychological mechanism called dissociation, which is basically to split off from conscious awareness really unpleasant stuff that is kind of incompatible, and this was first described, you know, in the late 19th century by the French, by the great French psychiatrist Charcot, who was a teacher for Freud and other people. And we actually, and dissociation has been, and one sees a lot of it in people with childhood abuse, particularly sexual abuse, also in refugees. It was interesting, I had a chance to speak to some people who had been hostages as adults I think it was they were kidnapped in North Africa or Arabian Peninsula or something, and what enabled them to cope with it was dissociation. Was basically writing a book, not being where they were. So it's a very powerful, and we added a new dissociative subtype this year to the PTSD diagnosis. So these are some of the personal factors. Prior trauma is a risk factor. Prior adversity, childhood adversity, some of the demographic characteristics, gender, race, education is protective. And then the traumatic event itself. Also, if the event was interpersonal, if it was intentional, if someone tried to kill you, tried to rape you, attacked you, that is much more toxic than a hurricane, a tornado. You know, what the insurance people call an act of God, right? And then the recovery environment, and I've talked about all of this: low social support, other stressful life events, new trauma. Now, if you have PTSD, and this is in the population at large, there's an 80% likelihood that you have at least one other mental health problem, usually depression, substance abuse. In treatment-seeking groups, it's much higher. I mean, most of the people that come to see me, by the time they get to see me who have PTSD, also have at least one other psychiatric problem. And there's co-occurring problems, which often can be worse and more disruptive to the quality of life than other diagnoses. I've talked about quality of life, suicide, relationship difficulties, which in many ways is the most awful, personal achievement, more medical illnesses. You know, there's been some studies looking at people seeking primary care, and if you look at the people who are always in the doctor's office versus those who don't come too often, PTSD and depression are very likely to be found among these groups, and other kinds of difficulties, so hassle. So in addition to the PTSD symptoms, people with PTSD have lower stress tolerance. So they're less able to deal with the kind of stresses that, you know, it's part of life. I mean, it goes with the territory. So we can divide treatments into two. There's two kinds. There's psychotherapy treatments. What this is, we're plotting an effect size here, which is basically one standard deviation of a normal curve. So just an effect size of 1 or greater, even 0.8 or greater, this is really good. So if you have a treatment that has an effect size of 0.8 or more, this is really a very, very good treatment. So you can see for psychotherapy, we have some very powerful psychotherapies, and I'll talk about them. And the medications they're more effective than no treatment. And some people can benefit, that's all they need. But, and many people would prefer medication because they don't have to talk about it. Unfortunately, drugs aren't as good. I think there's a lot of good reasons for that. Yeah.
I just want to interrupt, I'm sorry, but I just was struck by the fact that psychotherapy seems better because you're twining your way back through the issues themselves and learning to experience them in a different way in a supportive environment, whereas the medication just sort of blurs it all over. And I was thinking of the book Missoula by John Krakauer. It's really about the effects of rape, college rape in Missoula, Montana. And the girls who got raped before they were able to express anything remained with PTSD. They'd have recurrent fears. And then when they got together in a group and different college girls began to amass and they began to march and they began to speak to each other and they began to explain and talk to each other about what had happened to them, this huge power came out of them and huge energy. And I'm just wondering if part of that isn't that we don't want to talk, we don't want to be associated with these grisly, grubby things. And so we'd rather not talk about them. And the minute you do, you're identified with them and you can't ever escape that. And I'm wondering if that's one of the reasons why people would prefer almost not to, because you're trapped in the fact.
Yeah, you gave a wonderful a definition of empowerment, you know, and there's a very famous book that was written in the 60s by someone called Jerome Frank, called Persuasion and Healing, and what he argued is, it doesn't matter what you do, if you can empower the patient, you're going to be effective, whether it's medication or psychotherapy. Now, the psychotherapies that work in PTSD are, as you infer, are therapies that you actually grapple with the traumatic experience itself. It's not evasive anxiety management techniques. You're actually working through the trauma, so therefore you're achieving a mastery over it. You're metabolizing it psychologically. The medications are very nonspecific right now. I mean, my own belief is that 10 years from now we're going to have much better drugs. I'm not sure that they will be any better, and I'm not sure that's even an important question. I mean, as long as we've got a repertoire of treatments for different people that work for those people, that's really the goal. So we have a number of first-line medications. They're all antidepressants, you know, really looking at medications that specifically target the alterations in brain function associated with PTSD. We really don't have them yet. These drugs are pretty nonspecific. They're pretty promiscuous in terms of what they do in the brain, and I think that's one of the reasons why the medications haven't worked as well. The psychotherapies, we have two that I want to talk about. As I said before, both of them are what we call trauma-focused treatments, where the therapist helps the client or the patient revisit the trauma. One of them is called prolonged exposure, which is really the emotional processing of the event. You know, a reminder of the event is going to get you all upset, and how do you deal with that? The other is what we call cognitive, is really processing the trauma-related thoughts. Now, they're both very elegant derivations from classic psychological theory and research. This comes straight from Pavlovian conditioned fear. And this comes from cognitive psychology, where the basis is that our thoughts drive our feelings. Yes?
How about rapid eye?
Rapid eye is a third, it also is an exposure treatment. The evidence is nowhere as strong as this. The technique is a bit different, but it is an exposure-based approach. The theory this is something called EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. The theory behind it, which has been disproved, is that if the therapist moves his or her finger, or there's some repetitive motor movement while you're trying to think of the traumatic event, and the theory is that the brain can't do that at the same time. It can't tend to a repetitive motor task and that the traumatic event. Well, there's been research doing EMDR with the motor movements and without, and the results are just the same. So we know that that's not right. But what we also know is that it works, and we also know that it seems to follow many of the principles of these other two treatments, where the exposure is of the trauma.
It can be nonverbal, which is another aspect.
It is nonverbal, and that is, in my opinion, the best reason to recommend EMDR for someone who is so upset, and that they can't bring themselves to talk about it. But since they're thinking about it all the time, asking them to think about it is not.
A child who doesn't have the language, maybe.
I don't think the data with kids is all that good. I mean, the problem with kids is they're abstract. We have some wonderful treatments for children, by the way. They're also focused treatments, and we have school-based focus treatments. Yes?
What about energy psychology, which also works with exposure and cognitive?
Yeah. There is absolutely no good scientific data about the so-called energy theories, even though it has very, very enthusiastic advocates. But the scientific criteria are very clear. What you've got to do to show that your treatment works, and it's not there. There's no beef yet for these treatments. They haven't been tested adequately. Okay, I think I'm nearing the end. So here is one of my colleagues, Patricia Risick, did a head-to-head comparison of prolonged exposure and cognitive processing therapy, and she basically randomized 80 women. It was all women. They'd all have been sexually violated, both as children and/or as adults, and they received either prolonged exposure or cognitive processing therapy. And as you can see, so what we're measuring here, this is the CAPS. This is the clinician-administered PTSD. So this is a scale that we developed, almost the first thing we ever did in 1989 when we started the center. It's now the gold standard. So a CAPS above 55 is in the diagnostic range, and so and a decrease of 10 points on a CAPS is clinically significant. So you can see that after about 12 weeks of treatment, both of these treatments were very, very effective, and the CAPS scores were reduced by about 30 points. Really fantastic results. Most importantly, 9 months later, people were still better, and 5 to 10 years later, they had kept their improvements. Now, one of the advantages of the psychotherapy over medications, And you have to understand, I'm a pharmacologist turned psychiatrist, but I have to accept the data, and the data is that medications just it doesn't compare. Is that after you've had treatment, because you've really engaged, you've basically looked the demon in the eye, and you've worked this out, that the gains in treatment can be maintained for 5 to 10 years. With medication, when you have a successful medication effect, if you then stop the medication, roughly 2/3 of your patients are going to go back and have the same symptoms. So a person who has a good whether it's depression, PTSD, OCD, social anxiety, if a person has a good response to medication, generally he or she is going to have to stay on that medication. Now what I do is, if they've been symptom-free for a couple of years, I'll see how they'll do without medication for a while. So that's very impressive. And this is the last slide.
Sometimes veterans ask, how do I know if I'm ready for treatment? Well, if you wait, you're never going to be ready. Getting ready for treatment is like, how do I know I'm ready to get in better shape? How do I know I'm ready to be a better father? How do I know I'm ready to be a better person? If you're feeling pain, you're ready for treatment. If you can't do the things you used to do before you served your country, you're ready for treatment. If your freedom has been impinged, diminished, restricted because you fought for our freedom, you're ready for treatment. Don't wait until you feel ready for treatment. That might never come. If you see signs that you can't do what you used to do, then you're ready for treatment.
So that's Ron Acherno. He's at the Charleston VA. So I'm done. Questions? Jen, yeah.
You've spoken so much about PTSD, what it is, and the treatments that are effective. But what I'm really curious about are, is there a book, or do you know of those characteristics that parents can instill in their kids to develop resiliency? So if they have, like a hurricane or a car accident, or their grandparents died, how do you help them develop resilience in them, and then also in your spouse or your friends or people in your community, in addition to those things that you've mentioned, like the social engagement and
So the short answer is that first of all, understanding resilience, getting our heads and our arms around it, is a relatively new field. The Army has invested millions of dollars in what I think is a terrible idea, what they think is resilience, and it has no scientific basis. However, I think that's exactly the right question. I mean, my vision is that we're going to develop psychological vaccines. We vaccinate our kids against whooping cough. That's the goal. When we can, and we're going to do it. And in the schools, we have sex education. We're going to have stress education, and that we're going to be able to know enough to apply it. Now, there is a wonderful book for those of you that really want to read about resilience. You can get it on Amazon. And it's it's two authors, both good friends of mine, Stephen Southwick, Southwick, like it sounds, and Dennis Charney, Charney. It's very, and there's a chapter on hope, there's a chapter on optimism, there's a chapter on the neurobiology, there's a chapter on social support. It's the full Monty. It's got the whole, and so if that's you should have it in the library.
What's it called?
It has resilience in it. It's a long title, but if you click on if you go onto Amazon and you look up Southwick, you'll find two books. I'm an editor of one of them. Don't buy that one. That's a much more of a pointy-headed academic thing. I mean, if you want the state of the science, but the Southwick Charney book is just superb.
I'll get it for the library.
Get it for the library, yeah.
Wouldn't you say that two of the major ways we could improve the incidence of PTSD around the world would be, first, serious, deep, sustained empathy, and getting past the need for physical, state-paid-for conflicts?
Well, sure. I mean.
I'm serious. I'm serious. I don't mean.
Well, I'm serious too. I mean, I've been writing about this since 1989, and I said that one of the tragedies is that, you know, PTSD is preventable for the most part. We can't prevent tornadoes. We can't prevent hurricanes. But, you know, war, sexual violence, interpersonal violence, all the rest, you know, if we could figure out how to prevent that, you know.
That seems to be one of the primary things we should do.
You know, I mean, and there's things we could do. I mean, I think, you know, I mean, and I'm sorry if I'm offending some of you, but I feel very passionately about it. I think gun control is low-hanging fruit if we can get past the politics and the ideology. Yeah, Neil, why don't you show everybody? It's called Resilience, and then there's a subtitle, right?
Mastering life's greatest challenges.
Yeah.
What?
Resilience,
The
it's called.
science of mastering life's greatest challenges.
I'm sorry.
No, I think I'm finished. Aren't I finished?
Matt?
Yeah.
I'm reading Max Blumenthal's new book.
So, and if you want to leave, it's okay. It's dinner time, but I'll stay here as long as people want to talk.
It's called the 51 Day. It's called the 51 Day War.
Okay.
It's about Israel's war on Gaza last summer.
Okay.
And it's intentional bombing of civilian targets. And reading this, the horrific descriptions, it sounds to me as if half the population of Gaza is suffering from PTSD, and understandably so, the things that they've seen. How does one go about treating a whole population?
Well, I think this is a real public health question, right? And we could, and it's not just Gaza, right? I mean, there's Libya, there's the former Yugoslavia. I mean, unfortunately, Cambodia. I mean, there are so many countries where, you know, the whole population has been exposed to this stuff, and we can predict that at least 30% of them have PTSD. So, and even if we could bring everyone in for 12 sessions of individual therapy, it would take forever, and it would be astronomical. So that's not a viable option, you know, as your question implies. I think that empowerment, and there are many ways of empowerment. I think that helping a population rebuild their community. I don't think that's an option in Gaza right now, but certainly in some of these other places where the wars are over, at least temporarily. Bonding people. I mean, one of the problems with PTSD, also depression for that matter, is that whereas social support will ameliorate symptoms, the inclination is to isolate yourself, is not to want to be around people. So to overcome that, I think, is to create a context in which people can actually do something that is going to make them feel less helpless, less powerless, more connected to other people, and then to provide. And I think that frankly, some of the more traditional societies are better at this than we are. I think rituals. You know, the Navajo had this wonderful cultural solution for, you know, when a Navajo warrior would go out, and he would have to do things that you know, he himself would be committing crimes and murders and atrocities, and would see these things. And so the Navajo understood that to do these things to protect the tribe, you know, forced an individual to have to do these kinds of things and experience these kinds of things. They as a culture accepted full responsibility for what the warriors had to do. They had they still do have a 5-day ritual. It's called the Warrior Way. You know, I mean, there's songs and sand carvings, and a goat or two is slaughtered and everything. But the point is that the warrior is not permitted to be estranged, but is brought back into the. I'm not saying that that's curative, but I think it's a good example. I'm not aware of too many other good examples of where there has to be a cultural, social Solution. Ritual is one way to go about it, because it is a social, cultural, public health issue in these unfortunate places. Yeah.
This last vignette indicates that there are many men and women, I suppose, who don't realize or don't want to recognize the fact that they have PTSD. What would you suggest for a wife to do if she feels her husband is not acknowledging it, she's disgusted, and he will not go to the VA for help?
Right. So, you know, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink. So what we've done, so basically since 9/11, we at the National Center, and me in particular, have, you know, reconfigured PTSD as yes, there's a clinical problem in a traditional Western doctor-patient relation, but then as a public health issue. And so that what we have done is our equivalents of the smoking cessation campaigns, of the don't drive and drink types of things, to try, so because the point is, PTSD is relatively easy to recognize, at least some of these symptoms. Yes, some of them are subjective, some of them are internal, but if you're living with an individual, I mean, you know that he or she isn't sleeping. You know that he or she is calling out in the middle of the night, probably in a nightmare. You know about the avoidance. You know about the emotional shutdown. You know about the arousal and the hypervigilance and all the rest of it. So you've got a pretty good basis to at least have enough of an index of suspicion to suggest that that individual come in and see a professional. And because a diagnosis is generally easy to make. Furthermore, as I tried to illustrate, we have treatments that work. So what the Army has tried to do, and the military, with some success, you know, I mean, and this is not easy. So I'm not telling you something that I think is easy to do, is taking, is doing things like it takes a real man to acknowledge that he's not the man he used to be. I mean, you know, macho women in the military are you know, have similar problems, but there is a gender disparity. Women, you know, are more open to asking for help when they perceive it, and particularly in some of the military cultures, but in the culture at large. So all you can do, the other thing to do, so that's one issue. The other thing that is most effective is peer counseling. That let's just talk about a vet for a moment, but it could be a rape survivor, it could be something else. You know, so let's say that I'm married to someone, and I got a pretty good basis to think that she's got PTSD, but she's not going to listen to me. But if I could find another person, a woman who had been in this situation, who she trusted, she might be more willing to listen to that individual than for me. So peer counseling has been very effective in rape crisis centers, in military vet centers, Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, so that often is a really good first step, because you're not outing yourself as having an emotional psychiatric problem, which is stigmatized, as we all know, in this country anyway. Or if the person is very religious or involved in a religious community, to talk to the pastor or the rabbi or the priest or the imam, whoever that might be. It's not easy. It's not easy.
Well, the problem is also that there's no help for the wife. The VA offers no help for the wife. The only thing she can do if he is intransigent is get a divorce.
Well, that's not entirely true, although I could certainly understand why you come to those conclusions. There are if we're talking about a military veteran, there is a network of vet centers. There's 2 in Vermont.
They don't accept wives unless the husbands are in treatment or are willing to.
Is that so? I mean, some of them do. Also, there's there's family therapy now at VA.
Those whose husbands are in treatment.
Uh-huh. You know, I don't know. I'm not at the VA now, so I don't know what the local policies are. I know that the national policy is that the VA should be open to family. Problem the VA has is they're overwhelmed. They're not be able to meet the demand of the veterans alone, but that's not an excuse. Otherwise, otherwise, I think that a spouse, if the spouse happens to be a she or he, should get some help for him or herself, and then and through that discussion, figure out what the next course is. I mean, one size doesn't fit all. Every situation is different.
I would like to speak up. I actually am a divorced wife of a veteran.
Yeah.
And I am speaking up in regards to that his returning was possibly PTSD with a crossover with brain injury.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking up in regards to that because going through that is very, very difficult. And as you bring that forth, going through that with 2 children, losing our home and all these different things in regards to that. I would say that you're absolutely correct that in regards to the VA that was very difficult with counseling or any of those things connected with that. My ex-husband went to a brain injury association and was medicated throughout the course of this time through the VA. And a lot of the things pointed to avenues like, we're not sure how your veteran's going to end up. We don't know, what the outcome's going to be, and we don't really know. But there was a separation definitely between the wife and the husband. The husband was treated in different ways, and I feel that the VA maybe at the time didn't know the severity of the people that were going to return with brain injury and what those things were. As a wife, I could speak up and say that when you are a wife with 2 children and your focus is the home and the child and how to take care of them, it's rather difficult to do that and take care of the husband at the same time. And the negativity that was swimming around that as far as Vietnam and them coming back and what happened to the people in Vietnam, and then the war in Iraq and the difference between the two. I'm not very educated on war and how it affects people. So to have a veteran come back and have to live with that, with all the symptoms that you're talking in regards to that, was very, very difficult. And I can't say to you that I wasn't angry, and I can't say that I don't have my own issues in regards to that. But there definitely is a difficulty with the separation of the wife and the husband and the trust issues between going to the VA and the veteran having his needs met, him having trust issues of the VA and the military or whatever that is in regards to. I'm not very educated about that. But the outcome of that was him ending up in a brain injury association and being given medication. Medication, yeah, can help in some regards, but if you have someone that has an addictive personality, that can make matters even worse, because then they're running rampant, not only hypervigilant, but they're also trying to fill an empty void. And I'm just going to come forward and say, if it wasn't for the grace of God, that God intervened in our marriage, separated the both of us, and because I was judging what was going on with my husband at the particular time, God made it very apparent to me that I don't have the right to judge someone else for what they've been going through, and that I am a sinner, and so aren't most of us, and that we are spiritually sick, and that we need to go and face God, and that God will help us through any of these things. So when you're talking about these things, the Holy Word, the Bible, is you were talking about religion, is God has saved my life through that and has directed me away from being angry and helped me through a lot of the issues that of my own self, sin, and also has my husband was completely 100% compensated for his injury. we went through this for about 3.5 years of trying to figure out what had happened to him, and his paperwork kept disappearing. And I'm coming forward and saying this because it was very detrimental for me to understand what was going on. And not until I ended up at the church did I understand some of the things that were happening. You can't tell the difference between post-traumatic stress disorder and brain injury unless you have someone that's very educated that can explain the difference between the two. And then when the person's being medicated for those things, they're not so much in their right mind to be able to come forth to tell you, I have a brain injury, or if they don't know what's happened to them, they can't quite verbalize what's happened.
Thank you.
And I'm saying this because it's been probably 8 or 9 years of trying to even be able to talk about it myself, and I didn't have any of those injuries.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the alcoholism that you were bringing up, you said a lot of people may be alcoholics or use that as a coping mechanism. And if a person has a brain injury, would that not make that injury even worse?
Absolutely.
And also the medications. When you're medicating someone and you do not know what the injury is, or you do not know whether it's PTSD or brain injury, can the medications make that even worse for the person?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, part of the complication, and I'm very sorry to hear about your experience, but so we know that people with PTSD have altered brain function. Okay, there's been a lot of research on that. We understand that. Part of the challenge is that the parts of the brain that are most likely to be affected in a traumatic brain injury, and you can imagine what they're, this part of the brain, this part where you're going to hit your hand, and back here. Here and here, this is where the structures that are involved with emotional processing, with PTSD, and many of the veterans we see have both PTSD and brain injury, traumatic brain injury. And my own opinion is it doesn't make any sense to try to say, well, this is the PTSD and this is the, it's a whole. And I think that what we try to do is to come up with treatments that will help both. So, for example, some of the psychotherapies that I told you about work for people with brain injury. The research has been done. Some of these medications are very helpful for people with brain injury. People with brain injury are at much higher risk, for example, for depression. Antidepressants are very helpful and have no adverse effects. So if someone who knows what he or she is doing in terms of diagnosing and treating can provide treatment. Drugs aren't necessarily bad, and some of them are actually helpful.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
The evening's come to has to
I
come
just
to a
had
close.
one
But
more
thank
question
you.
before
We
I
can
go.
take care of that question after the closure, and I'm sure that
I'll be happy to
Matt will
continue
talk to you
to talk to you.
afterwards. Thank you very much for everyone for coming this evening, and Matt, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.